I think I leave some immediate term conversion on the table for the purpose of a longer term relationship with people. That's why I don't take the advice of ways that I could probably capture more value more quickly in the moment.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today we're speaking with Jay Clouse, a writer, podcaster, and community builder who has built a six-figure business by focusing on helpful content first and product offers second. Jay's approach to a creator business emphasizes slow, deliberate growth and genuine audience connection over viral tactics and aggressive marketing. In this episode, we explore Jay's journey from corporate employee to successful creator entrepreneur.
I made an agreement with myself, and it basically said, if I don't make any money through June, I'm fine. But if I don't make any money in July, I have to go get a job.
Jay explains why permission marketing is more effective than pushy sales tactics when building a genuine audience relationship.
Somebody watching your reel on Instagram is giving you their attention. Somebody listening to this podcast is giving you their attention. One of those decisions is a much more considered decision. When attention is considered and directed, that is much more valuable than attention that is basically captured by interruption.
And make sure to stick around till the end for Jay's practical advice on creating products your audience actually wants.
If you have a slightly higher than average view duration, then you can have a slightly lower click-through rate, because even if fewer people are watching the video, the people who do watch a little bit longer. So the total amount of watch time you're feeding to the YouTube machine is a little bit higher.
This episode challenges the viral growth mindset dominating creator culture and offers a more sustainable alternative. Jay shows how building trust through valuable content leads to a more resilient business than chasing quick wins and viral moments. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this episode with Jay Clouse.
In 2017, I left a job in tech. I was working at a healthcare startup after selling my own software startup in 2015. And I was just not feeling it anymore. So I left that job in April of 2017. I think actually like yesterday was the 8-year anniversary of leaving that job, and decided to go out on my own. And I didn't really know what that meant. I just had confidence that I had started a company before. I can figure out a way to make money. Like the switch had been flipped in my mind that I have valuable skills and somebody will pay me for something. Let's just play around with it. And actually, the most important thing I did for myself at the time was I made an agreement with myself. Again, this is April that I left. And I basically said, if I don't make any money through June, I'm fine. But if I don't make any money in July, I have to go get a job. So I basically gave myself like 3 months to make some money. I didn't even need to make a lot of money. I just wanted to prove like, yeah, I can sell something, right? And so in the beginning, it looked like some freelance stuff. I was like building WordPress websites and doing email campaigns for people, email sequences in MailChimp. Gosh, how misguided was I? And I started facilitating mastermind groups because somebody in my circle had basically been in a mastermind group and he had noticed that I had a great network locally. And he was like, if I was you and I had your network, I would facilitate mastermind groups because I think you'd be really good at it. And, you know, you could charge a little bit to each of these people and it would make enough money. And so I was like, interesting. I hadn't heard that word before. I didn't understand what it was. I had started reading some email newsletters from folks like Jeff Goins and Matthew Kimberly and Brian Harris at the time. And I was starting to get hip to the idea that like, email's cool. I can write emails. I want to write. I want to be a writer. These people are just like making a living writing emails somehow. So my thought in my mind was basically, I'm going to make this mastermind thing work to pay my bills. I'm going to be writing emails for the first year every day. And then after that, weekly. And I'm going to figure this model out, how these people are doing it, because I wanted to be a writer. So that worked out pretty okay. I basically figured out what do I need to earn in order to pay my bills and survive. And it turned out that if I wanted to do a mastermind group over a 3-month period with a month in between for marketing, and I could get 15 people at about $400 a piece, that math worked out. So that was the plan. I would do a $400 mastermind program 3 times a year at $400 a pop. I did that for about 3 years, up until this point of COVID in 2020. And it was working. It was what was paying the bills. I would do some like small stuff on the side to bring in some extra revenue because that was like very lean if I was just doing the masterminds. And then when COVID happened, just nobody knew what was next. Everyone was just kind of panicking. We're like, we know this is going to be bad. We don't know how bad for how long. And I probably don't need to remind people of this, but it's been 5 years at this point, actually. So it's kind of crazy. But like, I go back to that moment and my wife thought she might lose her job. I was doing some consulting on the side. I was noticing that people were a little bit less interested in like joining the masterminds at that moment because people were just not spending. And it was at this moment that Matt Gartland, who is Pat Flynn's business partner, reached out to me and he was like, hey, he had experienced the mastermind community thing that I was doing when he was solo. He's like, hey, at SPI, we are playing around with this new tool. It's in beta. It's called Circle. It's this community tool. I know you know community. Can you consult and help us in setting this up so we can do our first online community? And I was just like taking everything at the time. I was like, yes, any paid project, let's do it. Let's stack whatever I can to weather the storm that we just didn't know how long it would be. And so for like the last half of 2020, I was consulting with Matt and Pat and SPI, helping them build the first version of SPI Pro on the first version of Circle. And towards the end of that year, the launch had gone really well. And they basically asked, can you come in, join us full time and lead our community team? To which I said, I don't think I have the time. I'm doing this mastermind program. I'm trying to create content. And they said, what if we acquire your mastermind program, your community, and then you come in 30 hours a week and lead the team? And I said, that sounds okay. We'll do that. So 2021, I was semi full-time at SPI while still building the content business on the side. And that was a pretty big inflection point for me because I stopped doing services and could only focus on content and products in my business. So my business had like a 80% growth in 2021, while I was also a salaried employee for SPI. And it was kind of the end of that year that I realized I can't do both of these things. It's just too much. So 2022 back out on my own. And it's been kind of a rocket ship since then, to be honest.
Over the last 5 years, I've been aware of you and watching you. A word that comes to mind is patience. You seem calculatedly patient and not just chasing the next shiny thing. As a basic outlook, what are you trying to build that leads you to stay so focused?
I kind of just don't know any other way. Like I've never had a moment where things just like exploded and it's like, wow, I pushed the right button. I made the right post. I did the right thing. And now everything's awesome. Like that's just never happened. It's always been just tiny incremental improvements. I'm serious. It's just like I've never had that moment. So like I have no choice but to be patient and, try to make small incremental changes that stack up to a larger whole. That's the only thing that I've seen to be reliable and successful. So, the game for me has just been, I'm constantly doing this analysis of how I'm spending my time. And it's like the things that you could probably do a 2x2 of like things I enjoy and things that are working. And so things that I enjoy and are working, I'm definitely going to keep doing that. Things that are working that I don't enjoy, sometimes I keep doing them. If things are not working and I don't enjoy them, I don't do them. And if I enjoy something that's not working, I might still do that a little bit too. But I'm trying to move things into the quadrant of like, what are things that I enjoy and are working? And everything that's in that bucket, I can kind of just do forever. Like there's no urgency to stop doing it. So it's just, how do I get more things into that bucket? And, when you're self-employed and doing this thing on your own, you have a lot of freedom to figure that out. It's kind of like once you cover your baseline needs, you can just experiment and make things better for yourself. And that's really just what I focus on trying to do.
I've heard you say a few times in your podcasts or videos that you've considered that your business might be too smallly niched, like focusing on just creators is something you've pondered as a hindrance, and maybe also like why you don't experience the same virality. Have you embraced that as an asset at this point, or is that something that still bugs you?
It still bugs me because creator as a term is probably the best fit term that encapsulates the type of people that I can help doing the things that they're doing. But it's also kind of a weird term in terms of identity. Some people don't identify with being a creator if they are a YouTuber. They're like, I'm a YouTuber. Or some people might not identify with the term creator if they are a writer. So while like it's useful for me internally to wrap these things under the umbrella, it doesn't necessarily call out to a specific person. And if I am trying to actually serve all of these different identities underneath of that, that creates a messaging challenge. So it's a frustrating space to be in because I do think that creators are kind of a subset of entrepreneurs, which is just already a small percentage of the population. But then to either have to explain what that word means or make messaging that is a little bit more direct towards how people actually identify is the way forward. But even if you just break down if I were to try to serve people who do newsletters, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, X, Blue Sky, like there are all these different platforms. And then you have all different revenue models. You might be doing digital products. You might be doing cohort-based courses. You might be doing memberships. You might be doing physical products. And to some degree, like I help with all of that to a degree. And for most businesses, that's just not a wise strategy. And probably for my business, it's not a super wise strategy. I've kind of gotten to the point now where I've stuck with it long enough that it's working, but it probably makes more sense to be a little bit more targeted than I have historically been. Like the ideal version of this business is probably building a larger team, having staffed content creators under the creator science umbrella who really focus on specific verticals, specific monetization models, and crank out the volume of content so that when we show up on Instagram as creator science, we're just teaching how to do Instagram. When we show up on LinkedIn as creator science, we're just teaching how to do LinkedIn. But that's not really the business I want to build, I don't think. It would fall into that bucket of things that work that I don't enjoy.
In the interest of the long game, and by happenstance or design, just the fact that you're either not in the space or just the way you show up isn't hitting whatever viral algorithm, what do you want to build?
Well, virality is a very specific game. I think I could play that game and I could win that game. Business itself is a macro game filled with a bunch of micro games. And you have to constantly be asking yourself, what games am I playing? Because if you're playing a game, then the implicit assumption behind that is, I'm going to commit to getting better at this game. Because if not, what's the point of playing? The rest of the competition is getting better. So virality, which is only really possible on a platform that has an algorithm, that is a specific game where we understand the rules, we understand the players, we understand the incentives. To be good at this game, you have to be really great at scroll stopping hooks, both visually and in audio. You have to understand retention. You have to also, in a world of For You feeds, make this as broadly applicable as possible. And yeah, that's just not a game that I'm really committed to playing well, because I think of the term attention, it's not nuanced enough, because somebody watching your reel on Instagram is giving you their attention. Somebody listening to this podcast is giving you their attention. One of those decisions is a much more considered decision, a much more considered directing of my attention than the other. And when attention is considered and directed, that is much more valuable than attention that is basically captured by interruption. And I've just built my whole business on considered attention rather than interruption.
Your podcast specifically, when you talk to someone like a Jenny Hoyos or a Patty Galloway, you don't see the link where like your business can also be playing in that way, or it's just not what you want to do?
It's just not really what I want to do. I mean, for one, things that go viral have to be able to appeal to a very large number of people. I don't know that something could go viral just to creators. I don't think there's that many of them. So I would have to position my content to be a more watered down version of it so that it appeals to people who are kind of tangential to creators. So when you hear Patty talk, he is a self-proclaimed views maximalist. He's trying to maximize views on things, right? And the implication of that is you need to find the way to package your thing so that it's relevant to the largest number of people possible. And the activity of doing that is often abstracting like the core idea that started, which might be a little bit more potent and a little bit more advanced or specific to a type of person, and saying, let's broaden out who might be interested in this thing. And to me, that's great for capturing top of funnel attention, but I think that will create a much less efficient transfer of that attention down the funnel to ultimately some sort of purchase or paid relationship. So it's just not the mechanism that I want to get people through to like ultimately what funds the business, which is memberships or courses or whatever our products are. I know who the customer of that is, and it's not a large market. So does it make sense for me to make content that serves a large market because maybe a few of those people are a good fit for what I'm doing? I don't think so. I think it leads to like a lot of wasted attention and irrelevant attention, and ultimately maybe even like regrettable attention on behalf of the people that are watching this who are never going to have a deeper relationship with me in the first place.
I like that because I don't think people talk, and you didn't literally say this, but people don't talk often around virality of just like what it takes to get good at that content. And is that even the kind of skill you want to develop? It sounds like that's also not where you thrive as far as what you love to do.
The magic on social media would be that you are able to capture a ton of attention through interruption, because most of attention on social media that is captured is done by interruption. And then you flip that into somebody basically waking up out of the blackout they're in their scroll and saying, oh, I really like this. I want to know more about this person and I want to go deeper. And that's not typically what happens when you're scrolling Reels. Like if you suddenly lose 30 minutes on Reels, as I often do, how many of those views will you talk about? Will you remember? Now let's think about the creators who posted them. How many of them do you remember their name? Did you go to their profile? Are you now following them? Are you now subscribed to what they're doing? Most of the time, the answer is just no. Like, these are just empty calorie views that if you're working on like an ad model where the unit of value is just like an impression and you're selling impressions, that matters. But if you're selling your own products or services, it doesn't really. And so I just don't find that it's the best use of my time to get good at playing that game. It's better for me to play different games.
We'll be right back after this brief message. This podcast is brought to you by Teachable and therefore has no sponsors. So we always like to take a moment to encourage you to go check out Jay's newsletter and podcast. Creators like Jay are the reason this podcast exists, so supporting them helps support our ability to bring you more of their stories and lessons. You can find more from Jay at creatorscience.com or on YouTube at youtube.com/@Jay, both of which are linked in the show notes or description below. Now back to the episode. With that kind of mindset and approach, I look at your YouTube channel, which you say is still like not really fully profitable on its own, but you've been at it for a while. What is your daily approach to justifying why and how you keep building something like that in the scope of a larger business?
I do think it would be a net benefit to the business as a whole if more people had an interaction with me. And so discovery as a whole is an important aspect to the business. And I have chosen YouTube as, I think, the best discovery model for us outside of word of mouth. Because while it's still often an interruption game, you know, the majority of our views are first-time viewers who are coming from recommended areas. And we have interrupted their session on YouTube by giving them a title and thumbnail that's interesting to them, and they're going to watch it. That choice to watch is probably like sort of unconscious at the beginning, similar as it would be if I stop and watch something on Instagram. But on YouTube, it just keeps going and it's still me. So at some point, you either make the conscious decision to continue watching or you leave. And I like that there's this seamless experience of, hey, I got in front of you for the first time. And unless you leave, you're going to watch like 30 to 60 minutes of me. And I just think that that's a much better discovery mechanism than you're going to watch 30 seconds of me. And to continue watching me, you're going to then, at that 30-second mark, have to click my profile and then choose to watch more, which works when you do things like series. If you're doing a series on Instagram and you're like, buying a house, video number 1, and it's like, here's the update. Or better example would be like, buying a house, video number 4. I watched that. It was interesting. I'm going to now go to your profile and look and watch videos 1, 2, and 3. That's a good experience. That's a good way to turn unconsidered attention into considered attention in short form. But on YouTube, it's just all continuous. It's at the 30-second mark, it's still going. At the 60-second mark, it's still going. At some point, you're going to be like, am I enjoying this? And probably you're going to get like a much more potent dose of me through that. So YouTube, I think, is the best discovery mechanism for building trust quickly.
With this in mind, that for someone who wants to go viral, go get good at that, you can develop that skill set. But for someone who's more interested in building a business like you are, do you feel like we're entering a different era of how platforms function or what people are trying to build?
I think that's probably true. People like consistency. Also, on short form, the incentives are to publish a ton. So having a format actually helps you publish more frequently because it answers a bunch of questions out of the box for what I'm making here. I think in a lot of markets, a lot of spaces, you see a barbell approach where you have a lot of people on one end, a lot of people on the other end, and kind of nothing in the middle. And I worry with the way platforms are evolving and the way AI is coming in, it's really going to squeeze the middle class creator, and they're going to have to go more upmarket in terms of providing a higher touch, more premium experience, or down market where they're really competing on volume and price. The stuff in the middle is kind of hard. With For You feeds are just like really making it hard for most creators who aren't serving a large total addressable market. Because if you are making content specifically for triathletes, I'm thinking about somebody in our membership right now. If you're making content specifically for triathletes, that's not like a small number of overall people, but it's much smaller than people who care about parenting, for example. So if suddenly there are 5x more creators talking about parenting, there's finite attention on the feeds. And that content is probably going to perform higher on average than a triathlete training program because there's just not as many people who are interested. So the signals to the algorithm, this does not perform as well on average as something that can be more applicable to more people. So yeah, I think it's a little worrisome the direction things are headed for, what people have been calling the creator middle class. But awareness is the first step that things are getting harder and you got to figure out how to do it. The one thing that does give me some hope is podcasting is historically extremely frustrating because there's no discovery mechanism. And yet there are big podcasts. But if you look at big podcasts, most of them have been around for 10 plus years, maybe even like 15 plus years at this point. And they grew through word of mouth. Word of mouth is not going anywhere. People recommending things they like is not going anywhere. I think what we've actually had in the last, call it 10 years, is an anomaly where there was a supply and demand mismatch. There's a lot more demand for great content than supply. And the result was the people who were creating were rewarded with a lot of attention from new viewers very quickly. But now we think that is the norm and that's what we deserve on a discovery platform. But really, I think what we're going to see is that this kind of hits an equilibrium. Supply and demand flips. There's more supply than there is demand. And the only stuff that's going to survive is the stuff that's really, really good and people really, really love. And if people really, really love something, there's going to be word of mouth. It's going to grow slowly. So creators are going to have to get comfortable with spending a longer period of time working on something and by that I mean like working on the business, publishing consistently for less immediate gratification. That's going to be hard for people that are getting started today. But again, if you focus on making something great and you stick at it for years, you'll still have a chance, but you may not have the algorithmic discovery that people have enjoyed for the last several years. Sometimes I think about Tim Urban and Mark Manson, incredible writers. They also both got incredibly lucky with the timing of when they were publishing their writing on Facebook. That opportunity is gone. No one is like, man, I bet if I publish a link on Facebook right now, it's going to get seen by millions of people. Nobody thinks that to be true. Yeah, people are still writing. I just think the same thing is kind of true of where we're headed with most discovery platforms.
So some of what you said echoes, I think his name was Sam Nelson. It was the first time I'd read anything from him, but he's very much in the VC space and talking about all of the people in VC are starting to look more at like where they put their money based on how much does this person believe in their thing, because that seems to be what's going to matter most. But even coming back to your YouTube channel, if the period of time it takes to see success on these platforms might get longer for that middle class creator, how do you practically navigate that or know what growth looks like or when you're on the right path? Because you say you didn't know any other way to do this, but the alternative is to just stop and go get a job.
It's true. I just kind of never considered that an actual option.
So it starts with that, maybe.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's like if you believe that this will be successful and that you can make it successful and you kind of just don't give yourself the option otherwise, I think over a long enough time horizon, you'll figure it out. It may not look exactly like you thought it would in the beginning, but like we are progress machines. So we need to see markers of progress to feel motivated to continue. Publishing itself is a little bit of a marker of progress, but what we really want to see is like slightly better feedback from the market, the world, that what we're doing is interesting to somebody. So if you don't get any feedback is discouraging. And that's like a lack of signal of progress. You'll probably quit. But because we want this progress so badly, most people will not just do the same thing over and over again if it's not getting results. Most people will tinker and experiment and innovate and try something different. And that's kind of the magic stuff, is like you have to keep innovating and tinkering and playing around until you start to get like what seems like an imperceptibly small difference in a signal from the market. And then that just kind of gives you enough to keep going. I think you really have to choose to play games that you are just interested in playing the game, and you're not interested in necessarily winning or getting a specific outcome in any period of time. I encourage every creator who gets started to remove as much financial expectation from the project as possible. Because when you have financial expectations, sometimes you can make decisions that fulfill those financial needs, but they will almost always be different decisions than you would make if there was not financial pressure on the project. And if you're making decisions that are not the decisions you would make without financial pressure, you're going to move out of this territory of things that are working and things that you want to do. You're now in things that are working and other things that you don't want to do. And so you need to set things up in a way that you can keep doing it for a long period of time without an expectation of any result right now. And if you intrinsically enjoy doing it, that's enough to continue doing it. And also, that just means that you're winning from day one because you enjoyed the doing of the thing, even without the result of it. And it kind of has to be there. Like, creating content as a business is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's just not. Most people will give up. Even people who are having success, most people will not stick with it for years. So you really have to be operating in a direction that is intrinsically enjoyable for you.
How are you balancing experimenting when also maintaining a consistency in the library you're building? Because every time you publish a video, I know what to expect, but I assume you are experimenting somewhere in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're experimenting all the time. Every package of every video is an experiment. We have multiple thumbnail concepts and then multiple variations within that concept. We have a list of different titles that we're playing with. In the edit, we'll do some experiments. For example, we had a recent episode with Mark Manson, the aforementioned Mark Manson. And an idea that I had, our biggest challenge is, can we break our benchmark click-through rate in the first 24 hours? I know literally within hours the trajectory of a video. Yeah, it's kind of depressing in that way, in that like I understand we've published enough videos of roughly the same length in each video that I know based on the average view duration and the click-through rate in the first few hours what the potential of this video is. And so the biggest challenge is hitting the click-through rate that is above our threshold or on the higher end of the spectrum that we typically hit, which for us is like, if we can get up to 6%, that's killer. The longer we can stay above 5, the better. But if we start getting down into like the mid 4s, then the video's starting to reach its conclusion, unfortunately. And so the way to overcome that is, if you have a slightly higher than average view duration, then you can have a slightly lower click-through rate. Because even if fewer people are watching the video, the people who do watch a little bit longer. So the total amount of watch time you're feeding to the YouTube machine is a little bit higher. So with Mark's video, I said, okay, let's try to mitigate the risk of packaging a little bit by focusing a little bit more on retention. And the way we did that was we completely rearranged the interview that you watch as a viewer from the way it was actually experienced. Because as will typically happen, as is probably happening in this episode, the longer you talk to somebody, the looser, the more comfortable you get. And often like some of the best stuff is at the end of the interview. And for a typical retention curve, that means that most of your viewers are not getting the best stuff.
Don't even get to the, yeah.
So what if we just move the best stuff to the, like right after the intro? And what we also know is if we get people watching for, call it 5 minutes, then they're probably going to watch the rest of it. So if we can stuff the best stuff all the way at the front, then the overall average view duration will increase. And then we have a little bit more resilience in the click-through rate, which is true. That video, the click-through rate was lower than we wanted it to be. The average view duration was a little bit higher. So it had a little bit longer of a shelf life than it would have had with that CTR. But ultimately, like the CTR kind of tanked that video.
So to get attention, you're experimenting with your title and thumbnails. but on the back end, in a way that might not be obvious, you are completely rearranging or playing with the interview itself.
Yes. And in fact, it is not obvious. It needs to not be obvious for it to work.
Sure. I also keep focusing on YouTube just because I do think it is one of the smartest and safest investments for someone to focus on. But where are you with your channel at the moment? Are you excited? Are you frustrated? Is it just like a thing you're building and unpacking?
Yeah, it's both. I mean, we're doing so much in the business all the time and the results are varied all the time. So I can never get like too attached to any particular outcome in any aspect of the business. Obviously, we've invested a ton of money into the studio. This is like a $43,000 investment all in on this space. And so I wouldn't do that if I wasn't really optimistic about video. That being said, our channel is performing probably at its lowest in the last year plus. We've experimented with a couple of videos, like the last 2 videos in particular. They were both solo videos. One of them wasn't even intended to be a video. It was just an audio only podcast that I happened to record the video also. And I said, what if we try to make a video out of this? Can we do this like quickly? Can we do this relatively cheaply? And can it be worthwhile? That result was like, okay, it's not going to earn back the investment it took to pay an editor to edit it, but I learned something from it and it's going to make future videos better. The video before that was a solo video that was highly scripted. We worked on it for months, also underperformed. Okay, we also learned something about this. Maybe we shouldn't put that much time into the video either. So like we're even playing with the level of effort that goes into some of these videos to say, what is the right line? Because you never fully know what's going to hit and what's not. So you can't just be like, okay, blanket statement, solo videos don't work, or blanket statement, solo videos work. You have to basically say, I'm making a portfolio of attempts here. Some of them will overperform, some of them will underperform, a lot of them will be in the middle. This is literally what the 1 out of 10 ranking system is, right? So what I'm trying to find is the right size of effort to put into that portfolio of videos and cost so that the misses don't feel as painful and the wins feel great. And we're on a string of a few misses. So it's like frustrating when you're on that side of things, but we also know that videos can go to the moon. Like you mentioned our Jenny Hoyo's video that has 4 million views now. It's accounted for literally half of the subscribers on the channel. And so if we look at it that way, it's like, okay, that's just a shot on goal that went in, like really went in. We just have to keep taking shots on goal. And so the studio is an effort of saying like, yes, it's expensive to set all this up, time, effort, money, but also now I think our output can increase and that output doesn't feel as difficult. So I can take more shots on goal more quickly.
Right. Because it's so much easier just to get stuff out.
It's much easier. It looks net better. It sounds good. The raw materials that we have to work with are better. So yeah, it's still like to me, one of the long-term difference makers in the business, but it's not quite there yet.
This podcast is brought to you by Teachable, the platform that empowers you to share your knowledge, engage deeply with your audience, and earn all on your own terms. Because you are more than your 9-to-5, and Teachable has everything you need to grow the business or side hustle you think about while you're at your day job. You can get started turning your knowledge into a business for free at Teachable.com. That's Teachable.com, which is also linked in the show notes or description wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now back to the episode. How many times do you try something like, what is your minimum viable amount of times that you try an idea before you make a conclusion around it?
I wish I had a great quantitative answer for you. The longer I do this stuff, the more I allow my intuition to play a role. And so sometimes I do things just a couple of times and not only is it not working, but my intuition is like, this won't work because of these reasons. Or even if more often it's like, even if this does work, it's not worth it. It's kind of like where I end up learning something is I get enough data back to say, this isn't working to where I want it. Like the outcome of this isn't what I expected yet. But even if it was, that might not be worth it, is typically when I drop something. An example would be like, let's say that I make a Instagram story that has a link in it that goes to a paid product. And my thought is, well, my best stories go to 1,000 people. Let's see if I can get a story with a link in it to go to 1,000 people and see how many of those people click on that link. Maybe I post that story and it goes to 500 people and only one of them clicked the link. Then I'm not going to keep trying to get to 1,000 people if I thought that, I'm trying to drive like dozens of clicks to this link. It's just the math doesn't work for that. So it's more stuff like that. And the more I'm like high conviction that something should work, the longer I'll stick with it typically and like try. If I just like truly believe that something should work. An example would be, I think in audio podcasting, I think the best way to grow a show is to create a 2-part episode with a host of a show with a similar audience, where one part goes on their feed, one part goes on your feed. And you say, if you want the second half of this, go to this channel. The link is in the description. I think that's the best way. I feel very strongly about this, but I don't have data to support it. I tried it. It did not convert. But I just believe it to be true so deeply that I'm not willing to give up on it yet. Maybe at some point I'll change my mind and the data will just be so obvious, or I'll understand that I'm missing something that is making this not true. But I just believe it so deeply to be true that I will try it many times before I give up on it.
Maybe that's the answer, but I have to ask you that question you always ask everybody. Like, what is the juiciest thing you believe to be true that you don't have the data to support, which is one of my favorite questions you ask people.
That podcasting one is definitely one of them. I think another one, I've been very critical of Substack for a long time, and I've been lurking on it for the last 3 weeks. I think the product is really pushing discoverability right now. And so I'm kind of interested in Substack as a publishing platform. And, somebody was talking to me a couple days ago. She primarily posts on LinkedIn. And she was saying, outside of LinkedIn, where would you advise that I spend time publishing? And I was like, this is going to surprise you, but I think it's Substack. I think it's Substack's notes feature. I think there's reason to believe that short form writing on Substack alone could be an interesting platform to be on right now. But if you are also writing long form, and especially if you want to have a paid newsletter publication, I do think Substack is figuring some stuff out with discovery right now that makes it kind of compelling. I'm long-term still pretty critical of Substack as a platform because I don't think they're as creator-friendly as most platforms are. I think there's so many aspects of the Substack experience that are Substack branded that I think you end up building the Substack brand as much or more than your own publication. I think there's probably a lot of people who get emails from Substack, read them, and don't know the name of the publication they're reading. They just know it's from Substack, which is not my favorite thing. But if you are trying to start from zero and build something, I think it could be a good starting point.
Because of the discoverability tools.
Discoverability tools,
yeah.
The interaction between Notes. Notes is like their Twitter competitor. So the interaction between Notes and their long form published writing, and also their model is paid subscriptions. So if you are successful in proving that some people will pay for a subscription to your publication, I think they are incentivized to juice you a little bit.
Which is what you couldn't do with your own newsletter just on Kit or those other things. Yeah.
Right.
In my head, I'm kind of like building the Venn diagram of how Jay makes choices. And there's the matrix of working, like it, not working, don't like it. Where does it fall in there? There's the levers you have around the effort put into experimenting with something. And then assumedly, the last part is, doth it make me money? Is it working? Would you ever abandon the YouTube channel? Are there things you think of abandoning, or is the only option to basically figure out how to continue scaling all the things you've built?
I probably wouldn't abandon the channel. I might radically change how we do things. We have a pretty beefy team, and we put a lot of effort into pre-production and post-production. And if putting a ton of effort into pre-production and post-production doesn't yield better results than taking a lot of shots on goal with much less effort, then I would probably move towards just more of a volume approach. But I don't think I would abandon it outright. I think the only way I would abandon the channel is if I abandoned serving this audience, because I do think that channels are specifically tied to especially the longer they exist, YouTube gets a better and better picture in its mind of who this is for. And so if I was serving a different audience, then I might abandon the channel.
This may feel a bit of a tangent, but every creator I've talked to in the last 6 months, I've been trying to pry out a clearer vision of what the heck is the life they're trying to build. And a lot of creators, in other words, bring back some version of their elevator pitch about their business or wanting to be able to walk their dog whenever they want. I'm suspicious you're just someone who has thought about that much more. With all of this that you're building and the time you've put into it, what's the life goal?
I mean, personally, I still identify first and foremost as a writer, and I want to long-term be an author. That's a story I can't continue to tell myself if I don't write a book. At some point, I have to let go of the story and do the action. Back in college, somebody told me, they're like, I forget, it was like 4 or 5 pillars of your life that everybody has. He was like, there's health, marriage, family, friends, and money. He's like, basically, these are things that are like always present. We're always trying to optimize for. And really, there's only one that you can actually solve, and that's money. So I'm really trying, like for the longest time, that's made such an impression on me. I'm like, if I can just solve that, then things become easier. But that's like a slippery slope to get stuck down, especially if you continue to have scope creep in your lifestyle, or you surround yourself with other people who are also chasing that goal because then it'll never feel like enough. So personally, especially now that we have a daughter, I'm thinking much more like, well, what is financially enough, and where can I stop caring about revenue growth and focus more just on this bucket of, is working and I enjoy doing, or even I enjoy doing, and who cares if it's working, or who cares if it's making money if this business is still going. I've gotten close enough to the people who are like a few steps ahead of me on this journey, and especially in this vertical that I'm in, to understand what their lifestyle is like. Everybody who's like outlier level successful, I guess there are outliers of outliers, but just about everybody who is outlier level successful, they're making trade-offs and compromises that most people just wouldn't be willing to make. You can't actually use them as models for what you want your life to be, because you would not be willing to make the choices that they make. You know, Mr. Beast gave an interview on Diary of a CEO where he said this explicitly. He was like, nobody would want to live the life that I live, and that's why I'm successful in the ways that I am successful. And that's true in like every vertical, I find. So I'm trying to identify my values and my non-negotiables and be as successful keeping those things in mind. You know, like living in a suburb in Ohio, the business would be more successful if I moved to New York or LA or Austin, somewhere where there's more people co-located who do what I do, fit the profile of who should be on the show, but I'm not willing to do that. A lot of people will work like all the hours they're conscious, and like I'm not willing to do that anymore either. You know, after you have a child, it becomes so obvious that people who are like advice giving on social media and whatever that don't have children, it's like, okay, well, I'm not following your prescription anymore. And I'm like, I feel bad because I'm like, I was that guy. I didn't have kids, and I was giving all kinds of advice to people who had kids. Not like explicitly, like if you have kids, do this, but people who with kids were following my advice. And it's like, this actually probably wasn't contextually relevant to you. So yeah, I think you just have to be aware of like, what do I actually want? And is that what I want, or is that what people around me want? And I'm kind of wearing it like a jacket. Can I decrease my level of want? Because if you decrease the level of want, then like you get a lot more options. And when it's at the level that feels sustainable, like keep it there. I think with the way AI is moving, if you're in a position to accumulate resources right now, certainly accumulate as much as you can over the next few years. If you're in a position to save resources, I would save as much as I can over the next few years. Yeah, I mean, there'll be big winners who basically say like, I'm putting all my chips in on the business. I'm reinvesting everything so that I can accumulate more in the next few years. There is some wisdom in that as well, and not just like penny pinching and holding everything you have hostage. Like you will limit your growth in some ways. But there's a medium ground there where you should be investing in systems that you know work to have bigger outcomes more quickly. But I do believe that reducing your burn and saving more is worthwhile.
I wanted to ask you, as someone who has gotten to sit down with so many smart people in this space, what is the best piece of advice you've been given that you will never take?
I think I leave a lot of money on the table because I don't follow a lot of proven best practice, like direct response copywriting type of advice, because I think there are a lot of aspects that are tried and true, like proven, that work for getting people to make a purchase that capture value in the moment, but actually destroy future value with that customer. So I think I leave some immediate term conversion on the table for the purpose of a longer term relationship with people. That's why I don't take the advice of ways that I could probably capture more value more quickly in the moment.
Anything else you want to share before we call it a day?
No, Chef. I think we covered some interesting ground here.
Thanks, Chef. Thank you so much for the time, Jay. I appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jonah.
Jay is a great example of how focusing on genuine audience connections and solving real problems can create a sustainable, fulfilling creator business. His approach to building a six-figure newsletter by consistently delivering value before making any offers demonstrates that permission-based marketing builds stronger, more resilient businesses than aggressive growth tactics. I hope you learned as much as I did today, found something you can apply to your life, and if nothing else, were inspired by Jay's story to take a hard look at your 9-to-5 and make sure the way you work is working for you. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building an income out of their impact, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended next episode linked here. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.